Yeah, hello, colleagues. I hope this finds you well. My name is Lars Rademacher. I send you a warm welcome from Germany, and I'm excited to be part of this Ethics Month. And we, from the German perspective, decided to give you a bit of insight into recent cases that we had in Germany. My name is Lars Rademacher. I am a professor of public relations at Darmstadt University of Applied Sciences, and I'm also the head of the German Public Relations Council. The council is a roughly 35-year-old institution that is founded or based here on the support of three associations, the main associations of German PR and communication industry. And I prepared a little presentation on giving you some insights what has happened in the last more or less 3 years in Germany to give you a bit of a picture of what have we done and received here as ethical challenges that we all think have risen in the professional public communication field. At least the European Communication Monitor of 2020 tells us so, that ethical challenges are on the rise. And we thought of looking into some of the recent cases to explain what we think is relevant for the communication industry from a German perspective. I call that defending and developing an ethos, and I'm going to talk very much about the defense, so the cases, what we did, and then in the end, a few thoughts of what we gained from this insights and how we react to it. So, as I said, we are in quite an old institution, and we're supported by these three associations. In Germany, it's the oldest association, DPRG, which was founded by the end of the 50s in Germany. Then the quite young Speakers Association here, the BDCom, and the Agency Association, GPRA. And our main task is to identify and, if necessary, publicly give warnings or actually reprimand misconduct in the communication with the public. The cases that I'm going to look into with you start with the more or less major case of the recent years, which were the HEINSBERG-PROTOCOLS. And in this case, a PR agency, digital agency, Story Machine, that is founded or has been founded by three very prominent media personalities, so to say. The former editor-in-chief of German tabloid Bild Zeitung, the former editor-in-chief of Stern Online, and a very prominent event manager and former husband, widower of Guido Westerwelle, a few years ago deceased foreign minister of the Federal Republic. So he was equipped with a lot of political contacts, and these three founded the agency Story Machine some years ago, that is very much holding back with who their clients are and what they are actually doing for them. And this agency, in the first phase of the pandemic, was opening up here to offer to support the virologist Hendrik Streeck, which you see here on the left-hand side of this picture. And Hendrik Streeck was offering to Armin Laschet, the CDU Minister for German Federal State of North Rhine-Westphalia, and by that time just recently nominated as possible successor of Angela Merkel and candidate for chancellorship. So he was running for chancellor, and it was a tight political situation. And Streeck offered to conduct a study here in the region of the city of Heinsberg, where a lot of infections were noticed after the German Carnival season. So he wanted to look into that very deeply and got support and paid here by the government. Armin Laschet was very much in favor of finding evidence that possibly a lockdown could be avoided. So this was very much attention on this case. And we were notified that probably it was not quite clear who's actually filling these social media channels. Is it really Henrik Streeck, or are it members of his team, or is it the agency? That wasn't quite clear in the beginning. We looked into it, we asked the agency, and they corrected everything very soon and made clear that their employees were actually filling these channels and not Henrik Streeck or members of his team. But the more we looked inside it, we found some other irregularities. We found out that the agency that in the first place was claiming to do this as a pro bono project actually was secretly looking for supporters and also sponsors, financial sponsors for their work here in this case. And they circulated a kind of sponsorship offer, a paper, and in this paper there was a pre-written narrative more or less scripting what the possible outcome of the HEINSBERG protocols or the HEINSBERG study that Streeck was conducting could possibly be. So actually, yeah, you have to see there is an ongoing study with really open end, yeah, and open focus. And on the other hand side, we have a pre-written narrative of where this study might end and what could be the political consequences. So we thought that is an example of a very unprofessional public relations work. And on this ground of being very unprofessional, we actually came up with a public reprimand against the agency Story Machine. We actually will be in court with this whole case late in February. So this is a special month also for the German Council, because Story Machine wasn't very satisfied with this public reprimand. I think we can say that much. Second case I have is Wikipedia Germany. In this case, we found it critical that a lot of sponsored content in German Wikipedia entries cannot be detected easily. We know that, for example, in the English Wikipedia edition, you have warnings there, yeah, and announcements that in this article there might be sponsored content, yeah, that is written by authors who got paid for it. We don't have something similar in Germany, and we were warning the institution here, the Wikipedia group, the German users group, that we would actually like to see something and that we could probably reprimand them. And after this warning, nothing happened. So we finally came up with this public reprimand in 2020. And this had just recently, just weeks ago, a kind of nice turn that we see here from our perspective, because the German community now actually thinks of coming up with this kind of warning or advice here or notices here right on the entries. Because after a discussion that has been stirred by German comedian and journalist Jan Böhmermann, who was claiming around our election in the last autumn that also a lot of Nazi groups were influencing Wikipedia entries, and there was a lot of paid content, obviously, in the Wikipedia. Since he drew that into the light of public, the mind has obviously changed a bit inside the Wikipedia in-group in Germany, and they're actually thinking about coming up with this sort of announcements here. We hope that this will be a good and ongoing discussion. And we hope that we will see a better labeling in the future here, and hope that there will be good talks. A third case that we might have stumbled across also outside Germany is this one here of stakeholder lists that were part of the communication efforts carried out by MONSANTO, Bayer, daughter MONSANTO. This was brought up by journalists, German journalists, and we had the chance to look into these critical stakeholder lists, because the public claim was that there were gathered very private information that should not have been gathered because of data protection reasons. And we looked into the original lists here and found actually nothing special there, nothing that you couldn't have drawn together with some hours time and the will to seek information on the internet. Yeah, because everything was public that MONSANTO draw here together. But German chemical company Bayer actually decided to drop their PR agency, Fleischmann-Hillert, on this case. They said they were responsible. That was done behind their back. Fleischmann-Hillert claimed that that was not true. And in the end, we at least found out that Bayer sacked Fleischmann-Hillert for actually no reason. Yeah, we didn't find any kind of misconduct here with what Fleischmann-Hillert was doing on behalf of MONSANTO and Bayer. So their vest, from our perspective, was quite clean. Another case here was another case that also the former editor-in-chief of Bild-Zeitung was involved in, here as a private consultant. And it was this page here on the left side that you can see saying that there is a world sensation from Germany, a blood test that helps to detect women's breast cancer at a very early stage. We had to learn here by looking deep inside that it was totally fake news, that there were no clinical studies been done by that time this was published. And we learned something else, that a lot of colleagues in Germany have a very clear conscience and also a very clear understanding of what would be ethical and what would be not ethical. Because the speaker and media relations manager of the university clinic here in Heidelberg, yeah, had actually advised their executive board here not to publish this. Yeah, so the PR manager colleague here, a woman, by that time has actively advised them not to publish this because she thought it was on unstable grounds and was probably close to being fake news. But she got overruled. She had to leave the company and the university. And we came up with a public reprimand against the company, and the German press council came up with a public reprimand against Bild-Zeitung. So there was also a kind of cooperation. Yeah, one case more is this one here on hidden lobbyism that we found with our former defense secretary, Karl Theodor zu Gutenberg. A few of you might have stumbled across his name because in the past he lost his PhD title due to a case of plagiarism and then he had to give his PhD up. And we had a case here in Germany where we seen him comment on the ban of short sales that he was demanding, and he was publicly saying, and also in Parliament questioned by a group in Parliament that was looking into the Wirecard case, which, as you know, is one of the biggest trials that we have and biggest business scandals in recent years in Germany. And this group here, this investigation committee of German Parliament, asked him, and he was always claiming that he did that not on the payroll of Wirecard or someone else, and he actively lied to this Parliament investigation committee, and we could actually prove that. We could prove that from looking into the email correspondence also of the agency Edelmann that was working here in Germany for Wirecard. And so we found enough grounds to criticize him on committing hidden lobbyism, and he also received a public reprimand from the council. And the last case is one against the University of Hamburg, where a physicist here, a professor, found out just by a content analysis of whatever there was published on the origin of the COVID virus, that its origin has to be Wuhan based. And this was also a case where we as a council at the point have thought we might need to take this reprimand back. But if you follow this discussion, it's like a pendulum. Yeah, sometimes groups say, okay, there is enough evidence that a Wuhan laboratory is actually the origin. Then it goes to the other direction again and say, okay, we don't have enough of these cases, but I think still that our reprimand has a solid ground, because we might never really find out what it is. And this excellence university, the University of Hamburg, would have better not published this claim of knowing where the origin is. And again, the PR department of the university gave advice to the president not to publish this. The president again overruled. So what we draw from the recent years is, of course, that maybe our profession has a lot more ethical compass and than publicly, and then is obviously publicly perceived. But it's sometimes the management that overrules public relations managers and public relations specialists. And yeah, that might be also a good reason to think about the status that communication specialists have in their very organizations and the power to, push forward professional standards. That is probably something to think about. And as I said in the beginning, we're not only trying to defend this ethos of public relations, and I think I've shown you what we did here in some cases, but we're also trying to develop that further. And this development includes that we're right now coming up with 2 new guidelines. One is actually on science communication. And you've seen here a lot of cases that are connected to science fields, medical science at the most, but also general aspects here of science, and coming up with evidence. So we think it's a good idea and the right time to come up with a new guideline on what is very good science communication, what are the do's and don'ts of science communications, and how should good science PR be done. And we will also see later in the year another guideline that is actually on public participation and the acceptance processes, so public participation processes that are used or more used these days as a strategic communication tool. And we are introducing both of these guidelines, both of these processes via public hearings. So we asked the community and everyone interested to give their input on our ideas. So it's more or less a 5 to 10 month process, and we hope to finalize our guideline on science communication by mid of the year, maybe even earlier, like April or May. And we will see the other guideline, I guess, in the second half of 2022. And I think these are quite good prospects here for PR ethics in Germany. I want to thank you very much for your attention. And if you're interested in the work of the German Public Relations Council, please visit our website or maybe contact me or our other council staff by email or other ways. You can also follow us on Twitter, although most of the content is unfortunately in German. So for now, bye-bye. Thank you for listening. I hope you have got some inspiration here from Germany. And yeah, I hope to see you soon and get in contact with you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.